US President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a much-anticipated 30-minute phone call on Wednesday, believed to be their first contact since August, which included discussions on Israel's intended retaliation to Iran's missile strike last week. The White House described the dialogue as direct and productive and said Biden and Netanyahu had agreed to stay in close contact in the coming days. Vice President Kamala Harris also joined the call. Speaking shortly afterwards, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said its attack against Iran would be deadly, precise and above all surprising. So what happens next in the Middle East? Reports say Biden is reluctant to see the United States dragged into a war with Iran, which he believes would be unnecessary and dangerous. On the other hand, many in Israel seem to believe that they have an opportunity to deal a body blow to Iran, their mortal enemy. Israel's offensive against Hezbollah has energized Israelis who were desperate to break out of the grinding war of attrition on their border with Lebanon. For them, Lebanon feels like success and progress, a stark contrast to the position in Gaza. Despite Israel's onslaught on Gaza that has killed at least 42,000 people, most of them civilians, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has not been able to deliver his two war objectives: the destruction of Hamas and the recovery of all the hostages. Hamas is still fighting and still holds around 100 hostages, many of whom might be dead by now. The damage done to Israel's enemies, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, has produced in some Israelis an urgent conviction to go further and mount a direct assault on Iran. For them, a devastating air attack on Iran is a seductive prospect. Top of the target list for many Israelis are the heavily fortified sites, some driven deep into mountains, where Iran houses nuclear facilities that Israel and others fear could be used to make a bomb. President Biden has made it clear that the US opposes the idea. The US believes Iran is not about to make a nuclear weapon. An attack could push them to build one. One of the most prominent voices in Israel pressing Netanyahu to ignore US wishes is former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who says Israel must not hesitate to act against what he calls the Iranian octopus. Like the opposition politician and former general Benny Gantz, Bennett believes Iran is weaker than it has been for decades because of the damage done to Hezbollah and Hamas. He says, essentially, Iran was defending itself with two arms, Hezbollah and Hamas. They were sort of its insurance policy against a strike. But now both of those arms are pretty much neutralized. Bennett sees the moment as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do real damage to Iran's Islamic regime. He says, we need to accelerate the demise of this regime. This is a regime that will fall. If Iran acquires a nuclear weapon, the likelihood that they'll use it in order to save the regime is high. And that means they're going to turn the whole Middle East into a nuclear nightmare. Iran and Israel have been in direct conflict since April after Israel assassinated leading Iranian generals with a big airstrike on the Iranian embassy in Syria. Iran's retaliation was a missile strike on Israel. The escalation has continued. The latest came last week in response to Israel's assault on Iran's ally Hezbollah in Lebanon and the assassination of its leader Hassan Nasrallah. Iran unleashed a huge ballistic missile attack and Israel's Prime Minister vowed to hit back. President Biden was reluctant to restrain Israel in Gaza and has urged Israel to minimize harm to civilians in Lebanon. But he has been adamant that Israel must not answer the Iranians with a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. President Biden has said Israel must defend itself, but not by attacking Iranian nuclear sites or its oil industry. The US fears, as we said, getting dragged into a war that it doesn't want. And there are concerns that if Iran can ride out an attack, it will go for broke to produce a nuclear warhead for its missiles. The next phases in the spiraling war depend on the extent of Israel's retaliation, which could come any day now.